Recording start. Galactic date 47,392.6. I am Ambassador Krex Valinar of the Centauri Collective, and what I am about to share will change everything you thought you knew about the species called humans. Oh yes, those peculiar bipedal creatures from that gravity well they call Earth. The ones we all laughed at during their first stumbling steps into the galactic community. Well, prepare to have your tentacles tied in knots, because this story is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about them. Security recording pause, adjust environmental controls. Resume recording. The Galactic Security Summit on Space Station Nexus 7 was supposed to be another tedious exercise in bureaucratic posturing. You know the type, hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy, all pretending to care about trade routes and border disputes while secretly playing games on their neural interfaces. I should know, I was winning at quantum chess against the Regellian ambassador when everything changed. The emergency alert cut through the chamber like a plasma torch through butter. The holographic displays erupted with footage that made even the most seasoned diplomats gasp. The Thanoran Empire, those warmongering brutes we'd been monitoring for cycles, had finally shown their true colors. Their warfleets were tearing through Lumini space like hungry predators. Recording pause. Note to self-delete that last metaphor. Too dramatic? No, keep it. Resume recording. The Lumini. If you haven't met them, think of the most peaceful, gentle species you can possibly imagine, then make them even more harmless. They're basically floating crystals that communicate through light patterns and subsist on solar energy. Their biggest technological achievement was designing gardens that float in zero gravity. They wouldn't hurt a microbe, let alone pose any threat to the Thanoran Empire. The footage showed their crystal cities shattering under Thanoran bombardment. Their solar gardens, works of art that had taken generations to grow, were being systematically destroyed. The Lumini's distress signals were literally changing the color of space around their worlds from their collective terror. Processing pause. Emotional stabilization required. I remember looking around that chamber, watching the faces of 200 different species all wearing the same expression, horror mixed with helplessness. The Thanorans had one of the largest military forces in the galaxy. Nobody wanted to stand against them. The Arcturus Confederation muttered about trade sanctions. The Vega Alliance suggested strongly worded diplomatic protests. The Orion League was suddenly very interested in their schedule tablets. That's when the human representative stood up. Now, let me paint you a picture of Admiral Jessica Bennett, short by human standards, which still made her taller than half the species present. She wore their standard blue and gold uniform, and had this look in her eyes that I would later learn humans call righteous anger. She didn't shout. She didn't make grand declarations. She simply said, in that flat tone humans use when they're beyond angry, the United Earth Federation formally requests emergency coordinates of all Lumini civilian populations. We're going to get them out, all of them. The chamber erupted in chaos. That's when I realized I was about to witness something that would reshape galactic politics forever. And trust me, what happened next would make every species in the galaxy understand exactly why humans come from what we call a deathworld. Recording pause. Historical context required. You want to know the real reason why watching humans prepare for war sent shivers down everyone's spines? Let me tell you about the first time we met them. It's important to understand why nobody in that chamber thought they were joking. Their first ships looked like they'd been assembled from scrap metal and prayers. When they warped into the Proxima Centauri trading hub, half the station's automated defense systems didn't even register them as spacecraft. The other half tried to classify them as space debris. 3 vessels, held together with what we later learned was something called duct tape, limped into our docking bays. Add footnote: must remember to invest in duct tape futures. The humans emerged from their ships wearing what looked like primitive pressure suits. The station's atmospheric sensors indicated their vessels had at least 7 containment breaches. 7. Any sensible species would have turned back. The humans. They just kept patching the holes and pressing forward. That's when we got our first real surprise. Their ships might have looked like they'd lost a fight with a meteor shower, but the technology inside, pure genius wrapped in madness. They had perfected artificial gravity through rotational systems because they hadn't figured out graviton manipulation yet. Their navigation computers were quantum-based because they had somehow skipped over standard atomic computing. They were achieving faster than light travel, using a method that made our top physicists need to lie down in dark rooms for several days. Personal note: still can't believe they call it the Murphy Drive after some ancient prophet of chaos. Trade negotiations were interesting. While most species specialized in one or two areas, humans wanted to trade in everything. And I mean everything. They wanted our medical technology, but offered their entertainment media in return. They needed our advanced materials, but traded their cuisine. Which brings me to the infamous coffee incident. Recording pause. Suppressed laughter. Resume. Nobody had warned us that humans regularly consumed a psychoactive stimulant in liquid form. When Ambassador Monica Torres offered the Galactic Council members their traditional diplomatic beverage, nobody thought to scan it first. The resulting chaos included 3 Venusian delegates discovering they could teleport under the influence, a Rigelian high commander speaking in mathematical equations for 6 hours, and the entire Arcturian delegation trying to schedule an immediate trade deal for what they called brain activation juice. But here's what really got everyone's attention: their adaptability. Every challenge, every setback, every problem we thought would stop them just became another thing to overcome. Their ships weren't pretty because they kept modifying them with new technologies they learned from each species they met. Their computers were weird because they kept improving them in ways nobody had thought of. They didn't just learn from their mistakes, they turned those mistakes into advantages. Personal observation: their unofficial motto seems to be "hold my beer," which I'm told is a ritual challenge before doing something either brilliant or deadly. Often both. Looking back, we should have realized what it meant to come from a world that tried to kill you in 1,000 different ways every day. These humans didn't just survive their death world, they thrived on it. And now, watching Admiral Bennett stand before the Galactic Council, I remembered something else about that first contact. When asked why they had ventured into space despite all the dangers, their ambassador had simply said, "Because we looked up at the stars and thought, what if somebody up there needs our help?" Recording note: add emphasis how prophetic those words would prove to be. Resume recording. Timestamp: 6 hours after emergency alert. The first Lumini refugee ships arrived at Nexus 7 like wounded light beings, their crystalline vessels cracked and dulled. Their normal rainbow luminescence had dimmed to a pale, frightened blue. The station's medical bay wasn't even equipped to handle crystalline life forms we'd never imagined they'd need emergency care. Update: medical staff attempting to stabilize Lumini refugees using modified photonic regenerators. That's when Admiral Jackson Steele arrived with the 7th Human Fleet. Now, I've seen impressive entrances in my diplomatic career, but watching 15 human warships drop out of hyperspace in perfect formation, that got everyone's attention. The ships were sleek, deadly, and bristling with weapons that made our defense systems send out automated warnings. The Admiral himself? Picture a human male who looks like he was carved from one of Earth's mountains. He strode into the council chamber wearing their black and silver combat uniform, and the room fell silent. Not from fear, though some species definitely felt that, but from the sheer authority he radiated. Personal note: look up human term "stone cold badass" later. Seems relevant. His proposal was as unexpected as it was audacious. The humans weren't just offering to evacuate the Lumini, they were proposing to establish protected corridors through Thanoran space, with force, if necessary. The Galactic Council erupted in protests. The Arcturus representative actually molted from stress, which is never pleasant to watch. Councilor Zex of the Vega Alliance actually asked, and I quote, "Are all humans insane, or is it just your military?" That's when Commander Maya Rodriguez stepped forward with the battle plans. I've never seen strategic brilliance delivered with such casual confidence. She pulled up a holographic display of Thanoran space and began marking points with flicks of her fingers. "They've got us beat on pure firepower," she said, grinning in that unsettling way humans do when they're about to do something terrifying. "So we won't play their game. We're going to run the biggest shell game in galactic history." Her plan was beautiful madness. The human fleet would split into smaller groups, each one appearing to be escorting refugee ships. The Thanorans wouldn't know which ships actually carried Lumini civilians and which were packed with human marines and advanced weapon systems. Every time they attacked a convoy, they'd risk hitting either helpless refugees, a war crime that would turn the entire galaxy against them, or a heavily armed human strike force. Recording pause. Note unprecedented tactical approach combining humanitarian aid with military strategy. The Council's skepticism was palpable. The Regelian minister pointed out that the human fleet was outnumbered 10-1. The Proximan delegate calculated a 97% chance of catastrophic failure. The Centaurian defense minister suggested it was suicide. Admiral Steele's response? He laughed. Actually laughed. When humanity was still earthbound, he said, we had a saying, the probability of survival is inversely proportional to the magnificence of the gesture. We're about to do something magnificent. Commander Rodriguez brought up more tactical displays, showing deployment patterns that made several military observers gasp. The humans weren't just planning to rescue the Lumini, they were going to do it while giving the Thanoran Empire a lesson in warfare they'd never forget. Personal observation, first time seeing Thanoran ambassadors show fear. Interesting that it wasn't the human weapons that scared him, it was their smiles. As I watched these humans plan what could either be the most brilliant rescue operation in galactic history or the start of an interstellar war, I remembered why they called their ships AI systems Murphy. According to them, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But they didn't say it with fear, they said it with anticipation. Recording note: add historical reference. Perhaps we should have paid more attention to their entertainment media, particularly those they called action movies. Humans, it seems, have been rehearsing for this moment for centuries. Recording resume. Location: Command Center. Space Station Nexus 7. Fleet Admiral Aria Blackwood turned the Proxima Nebula into a work of art. Not the gentle, flowing art of the Lumini crystal gardens. No, this was the art of war, painted with starship engines and weapons fire against the canvas of space. Combat footage analysis beginning. The Thanoran Empire took the bait exactly as the humans predicted. Their massive war fleet, 30 dreadnoughts strong, charged into the nebula after what they thought was a defenseless convoy of refugee ships. The purple and green gases of the nebula swirled around their ships like ocean waves, obscuring their sensors. That's when Admiral Blackwood spoke 6 words that sent chills through every military observer in the command center. Time to show them our magic trick. Technical note: humans use term magic trick to describe strategic deception. Fascinating cultural reference. The refugee ships they were chasing? Hollow shells packed with electronic warfare systems. The nebula gases, seeded with microscopic drones that could interfere with Thanoran targeting systems. And those human escort ships that had appeared to flee? They had merely cloaked themselves using technology they had reversed engineered from studying Proximan stealth systems. The trap was sprung with surgical precision. Captain Viktor Koslov, commanding the stealth cruiser Midnight Thunder, executed what humans call a crazy Ivan, a full-power reverse thrust, while rotating his ship on 3 axes. His vessel emerged from the nebula gases directly behind the Thanoran flagship, weapons charged. Personal observation: never seen a Thanoran captain scream in 15 different frequencies before. But here's the truly brilliant part. Koslov didn't fire. Not a single shot. He merely broadcast on all frequencies: your sensors are compromised. Your engines are surrounded by explosive drone swarms. And you still don't know where our main fleet is. Would you like to discuss terms? The Thanoran Empire had built their reputation on overwhelming force. Their entire military doctrine was based on having the biggest ships, the most powerful weapons, and the most brutal tactics. They had never encountered an enemy who turned their own aggression into a trap. Update recording adding Admiral Blackwood's next transmission. This is Fleet Admiral Aria Blackwood of the United Earth Federation. You are currently surrounded by 200 stealth vessels, each carrying enough firepower to crack a small moon. Your sensor readings are showing you what we want you to see. Your communications are going where we want them to go. And that mysterious energy signature your science officer is probably screaming about right now? That's a quantum field generator that can turn this entire nebula into a very pretty bomb. She paused for exactly 3 seconds. Humans have an incredible sense of dramatic timing. But we don't want to fight you. We just want you to stop attacking the Lumini. Your next action determines whether this becomes a rescue operation or a boxing match. And trust me, you don't want to know why we call our Marine units Helljumpers. Observation note: several council members required medical attention after witnessing this exchange. The Thanoran Empire's initial reaction was predictable. Their flagship powered up weapons. 3 dreadnoughts moved to firing positions. Their admiral began the traditional Thanoran war cry. Then Captain Koslov's voice came over the comms again. "Oh, right. Should have mentioned. Those aren't normal sensor ghosts you're seeing. That's our actual fleet, now decloaking." The nebula lit up as 200 human warships materialized from seemingly empty space. Each one had its weapons locked on a Thanoran vessel. Each one was broadcasting the same message on loop: "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the human way. Your choice." Personal note: must research human phrase caught between a rock and a hard place seems applicable to Thanoran situation. The Thanoran Empire had never retreated from a battle in their entire history. Until that day. Sometimes it turns out, the most powerful weapon isn't the biggest gun, it's the absolute certainty that the other side has thought of everything, including things you didn't even know were possible. Emergency recording. Location: Battle of 7 Stars. Timestamp critical. Nobody expected the Thanoran Empire to break their retreat. Nobody except the humans. They had a saying about cornered predators being the most dangerous. They were ready when the Thanoran fleet regrouped at the 7 Stars system, bringing every warship they had. Tactical update: Thanoran forces outnumber human fleet 4-1. 3,000 Lumini refugee ships still in evacuation corridor. The battle began with a symphony of plasma fire and kinetic rounds. The void between the 7 stars lit up brighter than the stars themselves. Lieutenant Dante Morrison, commanding the corvette Swift Justice, was protecting the rear of the refugee convoy when the first wave hit. Combat footage analysis: Morrison's last transmission follows. "They want these refugees? They'll have to come through us first." His ship, barely a quarter the size of the Thanoran cruisers, executed maneuvers that violated several laws of physics. The Swift Justice danced between enemy vessels, its point defense systems intercepting missiles meant for the refugee ships. Then Morrison saw it, the Thanoran super dreadnought charging its main gun, aiming at the densest cluster of refugee ships. The Swift Justice had taken heavy damage. Its weapons were depleted, its shields were failing. Recording pause. Emotional spike detected in multiple observers. Morrison made a choice that would be taught in military academies for generations to come. He ordered his crew to evacuate, then piloted his damaged ship straight into the super dreadnought's primary weapon port. The resulting explosion cascaded through the massive vessel's power systems, turning the pride of the Thanoran fleet into an expanding cloud of debris. But the battle was far from over. The Lumini evacuation was only halfway complete when the Thanoran fleet launched their full assault. That's when Captain Nina Winters showed why humans are the most terrifying improvisers in the galaxy. Technical note: following sequence challenged several established laws of combat physics. Winters commanded the heavy carrier Thunderchild. When her fighter squadrons were depleted and her main weapons were running dry, she looked at her ship's cargo hold full of construction drones, meant for rebuilding Lumini habitats once they reached safety. Personal observation: never seen anyone weaponize construction equipment before. She launched every single drone, but instead of using them to attack, she had them gather debris from destroyed ships. The drones formed a massive shield wall, using the wreckage of Thanoran vessels to protect the refugee convoy. When that wasn't enough, she ordered the drones to start welding the debris together. Communication intercept: Thanoran Admiral, what in the 7 hells are they building? In the middle of a space battle, Captain Winters was constructing a makeshift space station out of destroyed ships. A battle station made from the broken pieces of the very fleet trying to stop them. The Thanoran forces actually paused their attack, trying to understand what they were seeing. That's when Winters revealed Phase 2 of her plan. The construction drones had not just been building a shield, they had been arranging the debris into a massive focusing array. When the last piece locked into place, the Thunderchild fired its remaining energy reserves through the improvised structure. Warning: following light show exceeded station's visual filters. The blast that emerged from the other side of Winters' debris array was amplified 100-fold. It cut through the Thanoran battle line like a blade through smoke, destroying or disabling a third of their remaining fleet in a single shot. The energy discharge was so intense it temporarily outshone 3 of the system's stars. But the most remarkable thing: the blast pattern had been precisely calculated to avoid any debris hitting the refugee ships. Even in the middle of desperation, the humans remembered their primary mission: protecting the innocent. Analysis note: Captain Winters later quoted saying she got the idea from watching her kid make a pillow fort. The remaining Thanoran ships found themselves in an impossible position. Retreat would mean losing face before the entire galaxy. Advancing would mean facing more of what Captain Winters had dubbed aggressive recycling. That's when the Lumini did something no one expected. These peaceful beings, who had never shown aggression in their entire history, positioned their rescued ships in a formation. Using their natural bioluminescence, they created a light show so beautiful and so massive it could be seen from 3 systems away. The pattern they made? A human symbol. The outstretched hand of peace, formed by thousands of ships carrying millions of refugees saved by human courage and ingenuity. Personal note: first recorded instance of Thanoran Empire surrendering to an art display. The Battle of 7 Stars lasted less than 6 hours. In that time, humanity rewrote the rules of space combat, turned construction equipment into strategic weapons, and proved that sometimes the best way to win a war is to be so creative that your enemy stops fighting out of sheer confusion. Recording note: add philosophical query: when a species evolves on a death world, perhaps they don't just learn to survive. They learn to protect others from death as well. Resume recording. Location: Galactic Council Chambers, 1 week after the Battle of 7 Stars. The formal surrender of the Thanoran Empire was broadcast across every communication channel in known space. Their representatives, those proud warriors who had never bowed to anyone, stood before the council and admitted defeat. Not just military defeat, they had been defeated philosophically. Historical note: first time in recorded history a species has surrendered to superior ethics rather than superior firepower. The signing ceremony was unlike anything we'd seen before. Admiral Blackwood insisted on having it take place on a hospital ship where wounded Lumini were being treated. The message was clear: this wasn't about victory. It was about protection. Personal observation: Thanoran ambassador actually cried when shown the refugee recovery ward. Apparently, even warriors can learn compassion. The new alliances formed in the wake of the battle reshaped galactic politics overnight. The Terran Protocol, as it came to be known, established something unprecedented: a guarantee that any peaceful species under threat could request human protection. The humans called it their big sister protocol. Leave it to them to make something so serious sound almost playful. Update: 17 species have already signed the protocol, more joining daily. But the real revelation came during the first meeting of the reformed Galactic Defense Council. A Thanoran general asked Admiral Steele why humans were willing to risk so much for a species they barely knew. The Admiral's response changed how we view humans forever. Quote, recording: we come from a world that tried to kill us every day. Massive predators, natural disasters, diseases, climate extremes, you name it. We didn't just survive, we learned to protect others from those same dangers. Being a Deathworlder doesn't mean we love death. It means we know exactly how precious life is. The galaxy's dynamics shifted fundamentally after that. Species that had once looked down on humans as primitive or aggressive now sought their guidance on defense matters. The Lumini, in their wisdom, offered to build crystal gardens on human ships, saying that those who protect beauty should be surrounded by it. Statistical note: trade agreements with human worlds increased 800% in the following month. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Thanoran Empire began reforming their society. They still value strength, but now they measure it differently. Their newest warship class, they named it the Morrison Guardian class. Final observation: the humans have a saying: the true measure of strength is how you use it. They proved that some of the strongest beings in the galaxy are those who stand between the helpless and harm. End recording. File under turning points, galactic history, and why you should never underestimate humans. Final recording entry. Personal reflection. You know, when I first started this record of events, I thought I was documenting a crisis. Instead, I documented a revelation. We called humans Deathworlders because they came from a planet that should have killed them. We thought that made them dangerous. We were right about the dangerous part, just not in the way we expected. Pause for personal observation. Yesterday, I watched a human child on Nexus 7 help a young Lumini learn how to project their lights to make shadow puppets. The Lumini was a refugee, still traumatized from the war. The human child spent hours showing them how to make butterflies and birds appear on the station walls. When I asked the child why, they just shrugged and said, Because everyone needs someone to play with when they're scared. Final thoughts for historical record. That's when I finally understood. Humans aren't dangerous because they survived a death world. They're dangerous because they decided that surviving wasn't enough. They looked at everything that tried to kill them on their world and said, nothing gets to do that to anyone else. We called them Deathworlders. We should have called them what they really are, life defenders. End final recording. Ambassador Krex Valinar, signing off.